Well, joining me now is Senator Jack Reed, Democrat from Rhode Island, actually the ranking member of the Senate Armed Services Committee. He and Senator McCain do a lot of work together sometimes. Senator Reed, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Chuck. Thanks very much.
Let me start with North Korea and get to the issue of the unpredictability aspect of President Trump. Is there, on this specific issue when it comes to North Korea, is there an argument that that's an asset and not a liability?
I don't think long-term it's an asset. I think you have to have a very deliberate plan. I think you have a strategy. I think, as Senator McCain indicated, China is key to that strategy. They have the economic leverage. They're the biggest trader with North Korea. In fact, their trade's gone up last year. They also, as we found out, have indirectly provided some electronics for these missiles. So if China can be brought to a point where they are putting pressure constantly on North Korea, there's an opportunity, I think, to try to freeze their systems and then roll them back. But there has to be a long-term, deliberate, day-by-day strategy. And one of the things I think that is harming the president is he's getting good military advice from General Mattis and General McMaster, but he needs a much stronger State Department.
I want to actually ask about this, and you talk about his relationship with General Mattis, who's at Secretary of Defense, somebody you supported.
Yes.
His confirmation. In the opening bite there, in your introduction, I noted about how the president didn't sign off himself personally on the dropping of the so-called mother of all bombs. He has given more leeway to his military leaders to make these decisions. Are you comfortable with that?
Well, these authorities have been given over the last several years. They've increased. In fact, when General Nicholson was before the committee a few weeks ago, he indicated he was satisfied with the authorities he had. And in fact, I assume that this was not a new authority. This was something that he was authorized, deploying a particular weapon system.
Right, but there was one comment from an anonymous official that said, look, in the previous administration, we wouldn't have dropped this without at least alerting the White House. And this one, we don't have to alert the White House. That is the essentially change. Are you comfortable with that change?
I think there has to be communication, obviously, between the White House and their field commanders on a constant basis. That's generally routed through the National Security Council. I think in this case, though, that General Nixon decided that the weapon was appropriate for the tunnel complex, that they minimized. In fact, there were no reports of civilian casualties. So the operation, I think, he deemed as something that was appropriate, well within his authority. He might have informed someone, but I don't think it went out of the way to do it.
Now, obviously, anything we do in Afghanistan is covered by a war authorization.
Right.
That was passed a long time ago. There is still some question whether anything we do in Syria falls under that or not. Do you believe it does or doesn't?
I think with the pursuit of ISIS in Syria, that is covered by the AUMF. It's an extension of the AUMF, but the reality is we've been extending that from many, many years now. But going after ISIS, I think, within the province of the AUMF. Other actions have to be much more...
So going after Assad would not fall under the AUMF?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think going after Assad in terms of a deliberate, concentrated effort to conduct military operations would require the authorization of Congress. I think the attack that the president took place, I agreed with the attack, was done under his prerogative as responding to an incident, a horrible incident. The right or the ability of nations to protect vulnerable populations. But I think anything further should be considered by the Congress.
Is there a circumstance where you would support sending more troops to Syria?
I think one of the things that the president would have to do would lay out a plan, a clear plan. The ad hoc nature of what he does, the kind of the flip-flops which we've seen dramatically this week, suggest an incoherence in policy. And that's a function of many things. I think temperamentally, as well as experientially, he's trying to come to grips with these things. He doesn't seem to be someone that follows through with the deliberate planning process you need. And he has to be able to come, not just to Congress, but to the American people and explain in detail what he's doing.
Are you comforted, though, by any of the flip-flops? All of them this week were sort of moves from outside the Washington consensus to within the Washington consensus, NATO, how to deal with China, things like that. Does that at all comfort you?
Well, I think it's recognizing in many cases the obvious, what he has to do. I think with respect to China, you know, their key role in North Korea potentially can't be sort of jeopardized by going after them as currency manipulators. In fact, there's some evidence by economists that they're not doing that recently.
Right.
One time they were. But I think these things are be more comforting if they were not sort of off the cuff, unexplained, or glibly announced, but rather the conscious deliberation and a conscious presentation by the president. And I think also, too, one of the things we've got to recognize is this growing sort of disenchantment with Russia, but that disenchantment has to also be reflected in serious concentration on the election in 2016 and what they did here, because they are still operating today in Europe using those same information techniques, et cetera, and we have elections coming up. We cannot allow the Russians to be part of our electoral process, so that's something he has to focus on.
Well, right now he's got to accept that it happened.
Exactly, and that's one of those things where that would be a great improvement in his situation. Accept it happened, and then move very aggressively for the good of the country to see what happened in 16 so that we're prepared and protected for 18 and 20 and beyond.
Senator Jack Reed, I'm going to leave it there.
Thanks, Chuck.
From Rhode Island. Good to have you here. Thanks for coming on and share your views.
Thank you.